Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
The tires crunched over the gravel driveway the way they always had when I was 16 and sneaking in after curfew, heart pounding, palms sweating, whispering excuses to myself before facing the front door. Some things never changed, not even after almost 10 years away and 1,000 miles of silence stretched out between me and them like a noose. The old house stood there sagging like a drunk, paint peeling off its sides in long, sad strips, windows clouded with the dirt of too many missed seasons, the porch railing clinging on by a few rusted nails. I sat in my car for a long minute, engine idling, wondering what the hell I was even doing there. It wasn't like they called to invite me. No. I got the news from Aunt Marge, the family gossip who never missed a beat, who made sure to mention, ever so casually, that your folks might lose the house if they can't find a miracle by June. Mother's Day was just a nice excuse, I guess, to march myself back into the lion's den and pretend like we still gave a damn about each other. I grabbed the cheap bouquet of carnations I picked up at the gas station just outside of town, already wilting in the back seat, and forced my legs out of the car. The air smelled like burnt grass and mold, the kind of heavy wetness that sinks into your clothes and makes you feel dirty just standing still. As I got closer, I could hear the creak of the porch under my weight, the screen door moaning its protest when I pulled it open. Mom was there, waiting, like she knew exactly the moment I'd step onto the porch. She didn't look much different, just smaller somehow, like life had whittled her down while I wasn't looking. Her hair was grayer, and her mouth still pulled tight into that little disapproving knot she wore like lipstick. "Rachel," she said, voice flat but stretched into something that might pass for warm if you were half drunk or desperate. "Mom," I answered, holding out the flowers like a white flag. She took them with a quick glance, tossed them onto a side table behind her without even pretending to care, then stepped aside to let me in. No hug. No kiss. Not even a real smile. I had driven 400 miles, 800 if you count round trip, for that reception. Inside, the house smelled like boiled cabbage and dust, like someone gave up cleaning the day I left and never started again. The same ugly mustard yellow couch slumped in the living room, the same water stains marked the ceiling like ancient battle wounds. My father hollered a greeting from the kitchen, not bothering to come out and say it to my face, and my sister Ashley's laugh floated down the stairs like perfume you couldn't quite escape. Ashley. Golden girl, homecoming queen, the one they actually wanted. She got knocked up at 20, divorced at 24, and still somehow walked on water around here. I imagined her up there now, maybe picking at her perfect hair in front of the cracked bathroom mirror, getting ready to swoop down and soak up all the attention like she always did. I dumped my bag by the staircase and followed the smell of something burning into the kitchen. Dad was stirring a pot of God knows what on the stove, wearing a stained world's best grandpa apron that looked like it had been a freebie from a church raffle. He gave me a nod, the kind of nod you give your neighbor's kid when they show up selling cookies, and went back to pretending the pot wasn't about to catch fire. No questions about my drive, my life, my job, just awkward silence and the heavy ticking of the old wall clock that always ran 10 minutes fast. "Rachel's here," Mom announced to no one in particular, and it echoed off the cracked tile like a sad little trumpet. I helped set the table because it gave me something to do with my hands besides strangle myself with the dull butter knives. Ashley finally floated in, perfect as always in her sundress, cheeks kissed pink by just the right amount of sunshine. "Hey, Rach," she chirped, giving me a hug that smelled like expensive lotion and insincerity. "Hey, Ash," I muttered back, stiff in her arms, pretending we hadn't spent half our childhood wishing each other dead. We sat down to dinner, if you could call it that, dry roast beef tougher than an old boot, canned green beans mushy and gray, and boxed mashed potatoes that still had powder lumps in them. We passed plates and fake smiles, every conversation half-hearted and slippery like we were all afraid to get too close to the truth. And that's when Mom dropped it, right there between the salt shaker and the gravy boat, her voice sickly sweet. "You know," she said, dabbing at her mouth with a paper napkin, "there's something important I've been meaning to tell you, Rachel." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. The room seemed to tilt a little, the air thickening until it was hard to breathe. "Something about your place in the family." My gut twisted, my heart crawling up into my throat, and for one insane second, I thought maybe she was finally going to say she was proud of me, or that she loved me just as much as Ashley. Maybe all those years of being second best were about to get washed away in one moment of honesty. But deep down, I knew better. Deep down, I knew nothing good ever came wrapped in that woman's smile. I sat there chewing a piece of leathery roast that tasted like regret, forcing myself to nod along to whatever nonsense Dad was mumbling about the town council or his bad back, while my mind screamed for an escape hatch. The overhead light buzzed and flickered like it was just as tired of this charade as I was, and somewhere deep inside me, a clock I had spent years trying to ignore started ticking louder and louder. I stabbed at the green beans, wondering how the hell they could make canned vegetables taste even worse, and tried not to look like I was counting the minutes until I could get back into my car and drive the 800 miles I had covered in the last 2 days, just to be insulted with powdered potatoes and plastic smiles. Mom sipped from her wine glass, cheap-boxed white, naturally, and fixed me with a look so syrupy it should have set off every alarm in my head, if they had not all been blaring already. The room seemed to stretch and warp, like a funhouse mirror, and I swear even the air smelled different, sharper, more metallic, as she set down her fork with a deliberate clink and leaned forward, elbows on the table like we were about to share some great, precious secret. "You know, Rachel," she said, her voice dripping with that faux wisdom she loved to pull out when she was about to say something ugly and call it honesty, "there's something I've always felt, and I think, well, you're old enough to hear it now." Across the table, Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes darting to Ashley like maybe she could somehow bail him out of whatever disaster was about to unfold. But of course she just smiled and tilted her head like a cat waiting to see if a mouse was really dead yet. I swallowed hard, the bite of meat turning to lead in my mouth, and set my fork down carefully, lining it up with the edge of my plate the way I used to do when I was a kid and hoped if I behaved just right, they might finally see me. "We always loved Ashley more," Mom said, almost laughing, like it was the punchline to a joke I was too stupid to get. "It's just natural, right? Some kids are easier to love." The words hit me like a slap, hard and stinging, and for a moment I genuinely wondered if I had heard her wrong, if maybe the buzzing light or the ancient air vents had twisted the sound into something crueler than she meant. But no. Her face was open and serene, like she had just commented on the weather or told me the time. Dad gave a little chuckle, a pathetic, hollow thing that bounced off the walls and made me feel smaller than I had in years, and Ashley just smiled like the queen she always knew she was. Inside, something broke, a hairline fracture that had been waiting years, decades even, finally snapping all the way through. I felt it happen, clear as a glass cracking under too much pressure, but on the outside, I stayed perfectly still. I smiled, a tight little thing that probably looked more like a grimace, and I nodded as if she had just complimented my shoes. No tears. No screaming. No dramatic storming out like they probably half expected and half hoped for. Just a silent, searing awareness that whatever was left between us had finally, blessedly burned to ash. I picked up my napkin, dabbed at my mouth like a polite guest, and sat back in my chair while they went on eating and chatting about how Ashley's latest disaster of a boyfriend had real potential this time, how maybe he was the one who could get her back on her feet again. Meanwhile, I thought about the check folded up tight in the back pocket of my jeans, the one I had written at the last minute in a burst of guilt and obligation, the one big enough to clear the second mortgage and maybe even fix the sagging porch before it collapsed under its own miserable weight. The irony was not lost on me. I had driven 400 miles one way, which, if you do the math like I somehow forgot to do, is only 800 miles round trip, not in 2 days, just to get punched in the gut by the people I was trying to save. It was the kind of mistake a tired fool makes, believing that the past can somehow be repainted if you just squint hard enough. I excused myself quietly, pushing back my chair and mumbling something about needing air, my fingers brushing the folded paper like a secret weapon hidden against my skin. None of them even looked up. They were too busy laughing at some story Ashley was telling about her ex-boyfriend crashing his car into a Taco Bell drive-thru because he was too drunk to see straight. A real prize, that one. Dad slapped the table in appreciation. Mom giggled and sipped her wine. Ashley beamed, the golden girl shining bright under the flickering kitchen light. I walked through the living room, past the sagging couch and the dusty photographs that lined the mantel, pictures where I was always a little out of frame, a little off-center, like even the camera knew I was never the star of the show. I paused by the stairs, hand brushing the old Bible sitting forgotten on the shelf, the one Mom used to swear by when it suited her and forget when it did not. Without thinking, I slipped the check inside, between the brittle pages that once held our family's lies and promises, and pushed it deep where no one would find it until it was too late. The door creaked as I pulled it open, the night air rushing in cold and sharp, carrying the scent of rain and something else, freedom maybe, or at least the first bitter taste of it. I stepped outside, letting the door swing shut behind me without a backward glance, and walked to my car with steady, unhurried steps, the gravel crunching under my boots like applause. If they noticed I was gone, they did not show it. If they cared, well, they had a funny way of proving it. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and sat there for a long moment staring at the crumbling house that had built me up just enough to know how far I had to fall. I thought about honking, about making some grand goodbye gesture, but what was the point? Some endings deserve silence. Some truths deserve no audience. The floorboards groaned under my steps as I climbed the narrow staircase, every creak sounding louder than it should have, like the house itself was protesting my return, a ghost angry at being disturbed. At the top of the stairs, the hallway smelled like old carpet and broken promises, a stale blend of mothballs and the sour scent of mildew leaking from the attic door. I paused outside my old bedroom, hand hovering above the doorknob, feeling for just a second like a kid again, terrified of what might be waiting on the other side, even though I already knew it would be nothing but dust and dead dreams. When I finally pushed open the door, it was like stepping into a time capsule nobody had bothered to maintain. The faded posters still clung to the cracked walls, corners curling with age, their bright colors drained into lifeless echoes of teenage hopes. The narrow bed sagged in the middle like a broken spine, the quilt, handmade by a grandmother I barely remembered, stained with yellow patches where sunlight and time had fought their long battle. My old dresser stood against the wall, the mirror cloudy and speckled, reflecting a stranger's tired face back at me. I crossed the room in a few quick strides, ignoring the lump in my throat and the heat prickling behind my eyes. The family Bible sat right where it always had on the top shelf of the bookcase, a thick leather-bound monster covered in a fine layer of dust, its gold lettering faded and chipped. I pulled it down carefully, coughing as the dust exploded into the stale air, and laid it on the bed with a kind of reverence I didn't really feel. The check was already folded, crisp and stiff from where I had pressed it between the pages of my wallet for the last 2 days, my fingers brushing it again and again like a talisman I wasn't sure I believed in. $100,000. A sum big enough to clear the second mortgage, fix the roof, maybe even keep the damn place standing another decade if they were smart about it, which, knowing them, they wouldn't be. There was no name on it, no signature they would recognize, just the house address and a scrawled Happy Mother's Day in the memo line, written in the neat block letters I had learned to perfect back in grade school when neatness had been one of the few things they actually praised me for. I slipped the check deep between the pages, somewhere in Deuteronomy if I had to guess, and closed the Bible carefully, pressing the weight of it down with my palms like sealing a coffin. I put it back on the top shelf where nobody ever looked anymore, buried under a stack of old church bulletins and dusty VHS tapes labeled Christmas '98 and Ashley's Sweet 16. If they found it today, tomorrow, a month from now, it wouldn't matter. They would never believe it had come from me anyway. Hell, Ashley could fart in the living room, and they would call it Chanel No. 5. While I could have handed them the keys to heaven, and they would have accused me of trying to steal the silverware on my way out. That was just how it always had been, and how it always would be. I took one last look around the room, breathing in the dry, musty air, letting the finality of it settle into my bones. No goodbye notes. No dramatic confrontations. No confessions or accusations hurled across the dinner table like grenades. Just silence. The kind of silence that said more than words ever could. Back down the stairs, past the kitchen where they were still laughing, still eating, still pretending, I walked out the front door without a backward glance, the screen slamming shut behind me like the final period on a very long, very bitter sentence. The evening had fallen heavy and blue over the street, the air sticky and thick, carrying the scent of wet asphalt and blooming honeysuckle. I slid into my car, started the engine, and sat there for a long time, headlights off, watching the house sag deeper into itself like an old man giving up. In the rearview mirror, the porch light buzzed and flickered, a single moth battering itself to death against the bulb, desperate for a warmth that was never coming. It struck me then how fitting that was, how the whole damn scene looked like a bad metaphor some washed-up novelist would have rejected for being too on the nose. But there it was, plain as day. The crumbling house, the broken family, the girl who had finally realized she didn't owe them her heart just because they gave her a last name. I tapped my fingers against the steering wheel, debating whether I should drive straight to a hotel, to a bar, to the edge of the earth, anywhere but back inside that prison dressed up like a home. The thought of walking back in, of facing their blank, self-satisfied faces, made my stomach turn, so I shifted into reverse and backed slowly down the driveway, gravel crunching under the tires. The house growing smaller and smaller in the mirror until it was just a shadow against the night sky. I pulled onto the empty street, headlights still off, and let the car idle there for a moment longer, my hands steady on the wheel. Somewhere inside the house, tucked away in a forgotten Bible, lay a check that could have saved them, written by the daughter they never really saw, the daughter they never really wanted. Let them find it. Let them wonder. Let them choke on the mystery of it. I pressed my foot to the gas and drove away, the weight of the house and everything it represented lifting off my chest with every mile I put between us. I didn't know where I was going yet, but for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly where I wasn't staying. It was 2 weeks later, sitting cross-legged on my worn-out couch in my small but quiet apartment a few states over, when the first ripples of the news reached me. I had not expected to hear anything at all. I had pictured them finding the check, arguing about it maybe, stuffing it into a drawer in confusion or suspicion, or perhaps even tearing it up in a fit of pride, convinced it was a mistake sent to the wrong address. That would have been fitting, and honestly, it would have suited me just fine. But life, in its stubborn and stupid way, never played out the way you imagined it when you were lying awake at 3 a.m, rewriting old conversations in your head. Aunt Marge, ever the family busybody and self-appointed ambassador of news, sent me a cheerful Facebook message at 2 a.m, one of those just thought you should know kind of updates that made my skin crawl even before I opened it. I almost deleted it without reading, but some sick part of me needed to know what brand of stupidity had bloomed back at the old house in my absence. Her message was short, littered with too many exclamation points and incorrect punctuation, but the meaning was crystal clear. Ashley had found the check, and somehow she had spun it into yet another golden thread in her already shimmering tapestry of lies. According to Marge, Ashley had told the family she had finally cashed in a favor from one of her rich ex-boyfriends, a hedge fund manager she had dated for 6 months back when she was trying to upgrade her life, as she used to call it, lounging around our parents' house in juicy couture sweats and sipping Diet Coke like it was a damn religion. Ashley, Being Ashley did not even blink when she claimed the miracle money had been her doing, painting herself as the savior of the family with all the ease and grace of someone who had been rehearsing for this role her entire life. Mom and Dad, predictably, ate it up like starving dogs offered table scraps. They sang her praises in public Facebook posts, gushed about her selflessness at church potlucks, and even posed for a few sad little pictures standing proudly in front of the newly repainted house, the sagging porch repaired, the overgrown yard trimmed and neat like it was some kind of fairy tale ending. Ashley beamed in every photo, her arms around our parents, her smile just a little too wide, a little too polished, like she could already hear the applause. I watched it unfold from the safety of my tiny living room, sipping cheap wine straight from the bottle and laughing until my ribs ached and my vision blurred. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who finally understood the joke had always been on her and was tired of pretending otherwise. They did not question it. Not once. Not for a second. Ashley was their miracle worker, their golden child, their eternal trophy on a dusty mantle, while I remained the afterthought, the ghost who had drifted too far to bother pulling back. Every week brought new updates, fresh photos of minor home improvements, a new mailbox, a fence repaired, gutters cleaned. Ashley's Facebook posts grew more smug with each passing month, filled with inspirational quotes about family and being blessed that made my stomach turn and my fingers itch to type something brutal in the comments. But I didn't. I stayed silent. Silence had been my weapon once, and now it was my armor, thick and heavy and necessary. I thought I would feel furious, boiling over with the need to storm back and tear down the facade piece by piece, but mostly I felt empty. A strange kind of freedom settled into my bones, cold but not unpleasant, like stepping out of a burning house and standing barefoot on cool grass. They could have their fantasy. They could keep their precious golden child and their shiny, hollow triumph. I had given them the salvation they never deserved, and they had never even seen the hand that saved them. That felt like its own kind of justice. Still, there was a sting I could not deny, a sharp little barb under the skin that flared up late at night when the loneliness gnawed too hard. It was one thing to accept you were never the favorite. It was another thing entirely to realize you could hand someone the sun and they would still complain about the heat. I buried that bitterness deep, the way I had learned to bury everything else that hurt too much to carry openly. Almost a full year passed. The seasons turned like the slow grinding of heavy gears, the days blending into one another with the numbing consistency of work, bills, cheap takeout, and the occasional hollow attempt at a social life. I stopped checking their social media after a while. It only made the old wound throb harder, and it was not like I expected anything new. In their minds, the story had already been written. Ashley the savior, Rachel the forgettable. It was late April when I got the call from Aunt Marge, her voice trembling with excitement the way only someone who lives for other people's business can manage. She barely got through the pleasantries before blurting it out. They got some tax papers, honey, official-looking stuff, and guess what? It listed the bank where that check came from, and it wasn't from some boyfriend, no sir. It's your bank. Your name wasn't on it, but the bank was plain as day. You should have seen their faces. I leaned back in my chair, heart thudding so hard it rattled my teeth, staring out the window at the gray, washed-out street below. It had taken almost a year for the truth to bob to the surface like a bloated body, too fat and ugly to stay hidden any longer. A part of me wanted to laugh again, the bitter, hollow sound that had become too familiar, but another part of me, deeper and quieter, just sat there, waiting. Because now they knew. And now the real silence would begin. The first voicemail came the morning after Aunt Marge's frantic call, buzzing against the cracked screen of my old phone like a mosquito I did not have the patience to swat. I let it ring itself out, watching the seconds tick by with a blank stare, knowing deep down exactly who it would be and what they would say before even bothering to check. Sure enough, the notification blinked at me like an accusation. Mom, 1 minute and 23 seconds of halting, syrupy words so painfully fake I almost cringed without pressing play. Still, curiosity being the persistent bastard that it is, I listened. Her voice, thinner and more breathless than I remembered, crackled through the speaker with forced warmth that might have fooled a stranger, but only twisted the knife deeper in me. She talked about how proud they were of all I had accomplished, how they missed me terribly, and how family should stick together no matter what, her tone wobbling under the weight of lies she barely seemed able to prop up anymore. There was no direct apology, no mention of the years of favoritism, no acknowledgement of the cold truth she had lobbed at me across that sad Mother's Day dinner table like a hand grenade she had never expected to go off. Instead, there were vague invitations to come visit soon and assurances that they had always loved me, really, in their own way, a phrase so backhanded it might as well have come with a slap attached. I deleted the message without saving it, feeling a strange sort of numb satisfaction bloom in my chest as the trash icon swallowed her words whole. Ashley, never one to be left out of the drama when there was attention to be clawed back, followed up with a Facebook message that might have been laughable if it had not been so damn pathetic. A wall of text filled with typos and emojis, her attempt at contrition about as convincing as a cat apologizing for knocking over a vase. She said she was sorry if things ever felt unfair, that Mom and Dad didn't mean it, and that maybe we could all just move past it and start fresh. She even threw in a little promise that she would make it up to me, though how she imagined repaying a lifetime of being second best with a couple of awkward phone calls and some badly spelled apologies was beyond me. I stared at her message for a long time, fingers hovering over the keyboard, a dozen savage replies forming and dissolving in my mind like smoke. I could have unleashed everything, the years of anger, the quiet humiliations, the way her existence had been used like a measuring stick I never measured up to, but in the end, I did not type a single word. I closed the app, turned off my phone, and let the silence answer for me. There was a time I would have killed for their attention, a time I would have twisted myself into something smaller, brighter, more palatable just to earn a few crumbs of the love they tossed so freely at Ashley's feet. But that time was dead, buried in the dusty pages of a Bible on a shelf in a house that no longer had any claim on me. The revelation of the check's true origin had cracked their little fantasy world open, sure, but I had no desire to go digging through the rubble with them, no interest in salvaging anything from the wreckage. A week after the tax papers surfaced, Aunt Marge called again, her voice lower now, filled with the hesitant sympathy of someone who finally realized which side of the fence they had been sitting on all these years. She said Mom was really upset, that Dad hadn't slept in days, and that Ashley was taking it hard too. I let her talk herself out, making the appropriate noises of concern while doodling aimless circles on a napkin, feeling nothing but a detached curiosity at how easily they all crumbled when faced with the idea that maybe, just maybe, they had been wrong. They wanted forgiveness. They wanted absolution. They wanted me to make it easy for them, to come back and smooth over the jagged edges so they could go back to pretending everything had always been fine. But what they wanted did not matter anymore. Some debts you pay in cash, neat and clean, and some debts you just let rot, festering in the dark until they choke on the smell of it. On a bright Saturday morning, with the first true warmth of spring soaking into the cracked pavement, I packed a bag, tossed it in the back seat of my car, and pointed myself toward a different horizon. I took the long way out of town, passing the edges of the neighborhoods I had once haunted like a bitter ghost, windows down, the smell of fresh-cut grass and diesel filling my lungs. I cranked up the radio, letting classic rock pour out into the empty air, the thump of drums and the wail of guitars stitching together a soundtrack for my quiet escape. There was a new highway cutting through the fields now, a stretch of smooth asphalt that gleamed under the sun like a promise made good. I took the on-ramp without hesitation, tires humming against the road, leaving behind the cracked sidewalks, the peeling paint, the heavy air of expectations that had never fit right on my shoulders. Wind tangled in my hair as I sped up, the roar of freedom drowning out the last echoes of their voices in my head. I smiled, A real smile this time, sharp and a little wild, the kind of smile you make when you know there's no one left to see it but yourself, and that is exactly how you want it. They could keep their apologies, their half-assed regrets, their brittle memories of a daughter they never really knew. Somewhere deep inside, I knew the scars would never fully heal, that there would always be nights when the old anger twisted awake under my ribs, when I would dream of words unsaid and chances missed. But those nights would come and go like summer storms, fierce, sudden, and then gone, leaving me standing on solid ground again, stronger than the wreckage they had left behind. Some debts get paid with money. Some debts you just let rot. And some you carry like armor, a reminder of everything you survived and everything you will never let touch you again. I drove on, farther and faster, the past shrinking in the rearview mirror until it was just another, on the wide, empty landscape.